Abyssal, Murmurs. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next horror stories. Story 1, Girls at the Club. I had a cousin, let's call him Mike. Mike was a partier, a big drinker, a prankster, and a playboy. He lived and breathed that life. It was a cold Friday night in Cali, and Mike really wanted a drink. So he invited my other two cousins, John and Adam, to go to the club. They all met up at Adam's house around 9 p.m. and then head to the club about 10 minutes into the city. Upon arrival, Mike was really excited and couldn't wait to hit up some girls. All three cousins went into the club and drank about 2 shots. Adam and John were more nerdy types, so they mostly kept to themselves, while Mike saw these 3 girls. They were some pretty hum girls, 2 twins, and a younger girl. Not thinking much of it, he asked John and Adam wanted to try and mac on the 3 girls. They declined, but Adam said that if Mike could get the 2 twins to sleep with him, he'd pay him $100. Confident, Mike agreed. He took his 3 RD shot of the night and walked over to the girls. He offered to buy them drinks and asked for a good time. They seemed to really enjoy themselves. One thing led to another, and eventually, the 3 girls and Mike found themselves outside in the alleyway of the club. The younger one said she was tired, so she was heading home, but the twins stayed. They talked and joked around outside. When one of the twins asked if he could handle the 2 of them, Mike laughed and said to them that he could take turns. The girls laughed, and they all began kissing in the alleyway. Mike closed his eyes as they caressed him and licked his neck, but somehow the licking seemed to last a lot longer than he wanted. When he opened his eyes to look down to see why they were so adamant about licking him, he saw 2 pale-skinned girls with long black hair, dark sunken eye sockets, and red tongues licking his neck and chest. He screamed and ran for his life. Adam and John waited a while at their lounge chair for Mike to finish partying. Adam finally got fed up of waiting and told John they needed to go look for Mike. It was already 2 a.m., and Adam had to work the next day, so they both walked around the crowded club looking for him, but to no avail. Until Adam and John made it to the restroom, where they found Mike in a back corner stall with pee outlining the stall walls. He was pale and screaming hysterically when they grabbed him. The 2 cousins took Mike home and brushed it off as him drinking too much. That night would start the long, torturous year of the girls coming to his bedroom window to try and break in. They would tap the window and laugh, while Mike curled up in his bed with horror. The girls would leave dead mice around his car and even on his windshield. He tried telling his parents, but being who Mike was, they didn't believe him. They thought he was just trying to prank them again until one night, when his sister and brother-in-law came to visit. His brother-in-law was a smoker and always smoked a cigarette before going to bed. On the last night that they were at Mike's parents' house, he decided to go out for a smoke around 1 a.m. on the covered porch. He lit up his smoke and took a huge puff. There were no trees around their house, so how are there tapping noises? He thought. He stepped out from under the covering of the porch to find 2 dark figures staring into the windows and making tapping noises. He felt his hair stand up and slowly crept back inside the house. The next day, before the sister and brother-in-law left, he told the family what he saw. Frightened, Mike's mom and dad called in a shaman to change his name. After the ritual was done, they moved him to live with another relative, so the girls couldn't find him anymore. To this day, his location remains unknown and his name unspoken of. Story 2, Hearing Loss. Back in the days when I was in Laos, I heard that if you ever see or hear something strange, just keep moving forward and pretend you didn't see or notice them. During this time in Laos, I had some hearing loss. Not totally, but enough to where I need to face you directly to be able to understand what you're saying. When I was about 13 or 14, I went out with my older cousin during the evening to check out some girls in the next village. On our way to the village, my cousin told me to follow behind him, so I did. He said, if you see me run, run. If you see me creeping, creep. If you see me hiding, hide. I agreed. I asked him why I must do the things he does. He said the road we are traveling is haunted, so we must move quickly. If he sees or hears anything, we must detour quickly. I was scared, but I told him I wanted to go, so he and I went on this adventure. As we went on to this little village towards the east, there was no problem. We met two nice girls who were just about to prepare dinner. They invited us to have dinner with their family, but we declined. We asked if it was okay for us to see them later. They agreed to come out and talk with us. I was happy, but my handicap was so shameful since I wasn't able to communicate well with the girls. I let my cousin do all the talking and laughed when he laughed. It felt awkward being there and not saying a thing. One of the girls asked my cousin why I was not talking, so he said because when I was young, I was stung by some wasp in the ear. The girl felt so sorry for me, so she came and sat next to me, but I was shy since this was the first time a girl noticed me at all. I tried to gather up some courage and carry a conversation with her, but everything that came out was yes and no. Mostly head nodding. She did most of the talking for the both of us. By the time I knew it, it had gotten very late. My cousin was still talking to the other girl while I was sitting next to this girl I liked very much. I finally got enough courage to tell her my name and ask her for her name, and if it was okay for me to see her again. She smiled and said yes. I asked her if my handicap made her think differently of me. She said, it's my heart she wanted, not my ears. I was so happy. It was getting close to morning about 4 a.m., and the roosters were beginning to crow. We said our goodbyes. On our way back, I was following my cousin closely. All of a sudden, he started to run, so I ran after him. Every turn he made, I followed exactly how he told me to. We came to a crossroad, and there was a lady dressed in black standing there in the middle of the road looking southward. My cousin stopped, and we hid behind a big tree. He put his hand to my mouth and whispered to me not to move or make any sound. We watched through the leaves, and the lady started to walk towards our direction. My cousin made sign language for us to hide underneath the leaves and let her pass. I could feel my heart pounding and the hair on my arms and neck rising. As we laid underneath the leaves, we could see her pass by. I could barely see a face, but I knew she wasn't human. We just lay quietly and watched her go down the road. Instead of going back on the road, we detoured through the woods and found a different path home. My cousin and I were scared. My cousin said, "Did you hear her calling your name?" I said no. I thought he was joking, but he looked serious. He said, "Did you tell those girls your name?" I said yes. Then he said, "Never ask for a girl's name or tell her your name out in the open." I was young and stupid. I didn't know what I was doing, and no one taught me all this. When we got home, he told my dad that we saw a demon calling my name on the road. My dad went and fetched a shaman right away. The shaman said we need to change my name or else the demon will find me. Then I'll get sick. So right then and there, the shaman made a doll out of straws and tied my shirt onto the doll and said the person you seek is no longer here, so stop bothering us. The shaman and my father took the doll to a cliff and threw it off the cliff. Later that week, I heard that the girl I was talking to got really sick and died. Even though my name was changed, I kept seeing that girl in my dreams. Sometimes the dreams seemed so real, like she was right here with me. In my dreams, I knew it was only a dream and asked her to stop coming to see me. But she said she wanted me and only me. I told her I'm too young and still irresponsible. But she said she loved me so much and that she'd always be with me. In my dreams, she was so beautiful and so wonderful. But I knew she was dead, so I tried my best to persuade her to leave me alone. She would cry, and it made me sad to see her cry. Once during harvesting time, I was tired, so I went to sleep at our farm hut. I could have sworn I saw her vividly in our garden. I got up and scanned the rice field, but it was only my imagination. I was kind of scared, but I had to be strong and pretend what I noticed didn't happen. I continued gathering the rice into piles. My dad said, "Let's go home." He came to me and said, "Are you all right?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You look pale." He then asked me if something happened to me today. Then I told him that since the last time the shaman came to our house, a week after I started having dreams of my dead girlfriend, earlier, I saw her in our rice field. He got his Hmong knife and raised it over my head and said, "Leave my son alone. You are now in the land of the dead. My son is still alive, so please leave him alone. I don't want to harm you, so show us some respect. If you truly love my son, then leave him alone." When we got home, my dad went to fetch the shaman again. We went to the village where the girl was living. We went to her house. It was abandoned. We gave our condolences and killed a pig as an offering to her. Her family no longer lived in that village. After she died, they moved to another town to be closer to her dad's relatives. Ever since we did the offering, she never came to see me again. In 1986, we came to the US. I am no longer deaf. Turns out, I had a bad ear infection, and with a cochlear hearing implant. I'm doing great. I always wonder, what if I had heard that women calling my name would? I have died like that girl. I guess having hearing loss was a blessing in disguise. Story 3. The Haunting Dream. The little girl who found me again. When I was younger, middle school, dreamed about a little girl trying to kill me and harm my family for a week straight. I would also get sat on by this little girl ghost. I would even have the same dream over and over again. I finally gave in and told my mom about my dreams. That night, my mom came into my room before I went to sleep. She said a few words in Hmong and put a Hmong knife under my pillow. I stopped dreaming about her. I slept with a knife under my pillow up until I left to go to college. When I went away to college, it never crossed my mind that I would encounter her again in my dreams. I am now about to graduate college, so it has been some years now that I have dreamed about her. A few months ago, she came back into my dreams, but she came in a form of someone else. Although she was disguised as someone else, I knew it was her. She locked me in a room and told me that she has found me and was coming back for me when I start to turn the color blue. She was referring to how sick I was going to get. She even pointed out how blue I was already turning. She then disappeared, and someone else approached me in my dream and told me I was going to have to go to war soon. I didn't really know how to take it, but I was pretty freaked out. I called my mom and told her about my dream, and she just told me to grab a knife and put it under my pillow. A few days later, I started to get sick, but I didn't think anything of it. I went home the following weekend, and I just got more and more sick. I finally told my mom I wasn't feeling too well, and she just gave me medicine. Later that night, she woke me up and had my dad tie a red string around my ankle. Right when he started speaking and tying the red string on my ankle, it finally hit me why he was doing it. The little girl was right. I was going to get sick, so it freaked me out, but I did recover soon after the red string was tied onto me. After that, I didn't dream about her anymore, but I would have dreams about other ghosts who would come and try to take me away with them. After I got the red string tied on me, the little girl did come to me one last time, but this time she was with someone else. I was half awake and half asleep. I heard them having a conversation with each other. The little girl was starting to get on top of me, and I could start to feel the pressure, but the other person she was with stopped her and said that she couldn't do that to me because I had the red string on my ankle to protect me. The pressure on my chest went away, and I quickly turned my body to the side. I told my mom what happened, and she took me to a shaman's house to get more strings tied on my ankle. Now, I have 3. I haven't had any more bad dreams since then, so I am hoping that it stays that way. Story 4. The Curse of Zoua, the disappearing tribe of the mountain. This is not really a ghost story. It's more of a scary folklore about Mung Green. A long time ago, there was a home white tribe living on a mountain. There was a young girl, Zoua, who was the daughter of the leader of the home white tribe. One day, Zoua was out exploring the woods when she heard people having a jingle bell, only it didn't sound like a jingle bell.
It sounded sad and heartbreaking.
She took a peek at the tribe and noticed they were all so skinny and starving. Zoua felt sorry for them and went back home and stole one of her father's chickens and took it to the strange tribe in the woods. It was really late and no one was awake, so she tied the chicken to a post and went home. The next day, Zoua returned to the tribe and saw them cheering and praying. Zoua was happy with her good deed and decided to bring them a pig this time. She stole one of her father's pigs and tied it to a post for them once again. She returned the next day to the tribe and found them cheering and praying. She was so delighted with how much she had helped the tribe that this time she was going to bring them a cow. She returned home and stole her father's cow. Her father showed up and asked her why she had stolen his chicken, his pig, and now his cow. Zoua explained everything, and her father was really proud of her. Zoua's father got the whole tribe together, and they brought all sorts of foods for the tribe in the forest. When the strange tribe saw them, they were cheering and smiling. Zoua's father spoke to the leader of the strange tribe and told them of Zoua's deeds. The leader of the strange tribe looked to Zoua and said, "Thank you for answering our prayers and bringing us all this food. You see, about 2 years ago, the land went bad and all our crops died. When the crops all died, we had nothing to feed our cattle, so all our cattle died as well." As the man continued telling Zoua about their terrible past, Zoua saw the chicken she brought for them, hopping around on the ground alive as could be. The pig was playing around in the mud, alive as well. Just then, as her stomach dropped, she was knocked over the head, and Zoua and her tribe were never seen again. Story 5. October Sleepless Nights. This story happened about 3 years ago, just around this time in October. It was dark at night, already probably around 9:10 p.m. I was in the living room with my 5-month-old and 4-year-old just sitting on the sofa watching TV by ourselves. My meal was in her room watching her Hmong movies. Husband was upstairs playing games, and his sisters and his niece were watching TV in their room. All of a sudden, My Mile comes out of her room and asks me the kids were jumping upstairs. The only kids at that time, of course, was my 2 kids and 8-year-old niece. I told her my kids were with me and that it must be the girls upstairs because they are usually loud. My Mill went back to her room. Just minutes after she left, I hear a loud pound from outside of the living room wall where I was sitting. My kids and I jumped. Right then, my Sills ran downstairs and asked what that noise was. I told them it came from outside. My Mile came running and said another pounding came from her wall. My husband ran downstairs. All of us settled to my mill room to make out what was happening, and then more pounding on the wall in front of us. My husband and I yelled at it to stop. At this time, everyone was terrified. My in-laws lived in a quiet neighborhood for the past 20+ years, and nothing like this have ever happened. The neighborhood consists of mostly seniors. The only kids were our neighbors, whom at that time were only in middle school, and they were good kids. Everyone knew it was something else. Of course we are among. My Sills did end up calling the police, and they came out and found nothing, but said maybe it was a prank since Halloween was around the corner. Frightened and scared, we all stayed inside and wondered what had happened. We decided that maybe it was just a prank. However, my Mile sought out a shaman who was also one of our relatives. The shaman saw that the pounding was from a spirit. The spirit was a male dragon, and it was connected to me. It was mad because it claimed I have forgotten it. In my high school years before I married my husband, I participated in my local Hmong New Year pageant. It claimed that it found me attractive and have been following me since it heard of me during our local event. The elders always said sometimes big events truly attract not just the living, but also the other side. After joining the pageant, I do remember always having nightmares about a body of water. I was always stuck in the middle of shore, but there was always a tree or a branch that will rescue me. Ever since those dreams, I grew fear of any body of water. I could never stand to look at it. At that time, I lived in another state, State 1. By the time I graduated from high school, my family moved out of the state, State 2. A year later, I married my husband and moved to where he was living, State 3. In the midst of moving back and forth, the spirit lost track of my whereabouts. For 2 years, my husband and I resided near my side of the family, State 2, and we finally moved back to live with the in-laws, State 3. A month after giving birth to my youngest, my Sills and I decided to take the kids to the beach where we lived. We lived near the Great Lakes. When I walked into the lake, I felt the fear crawling through me. But since my Sills insisted, I went in anyways. Now back to the shaman. She was able to tell the spirit to go away, and it left, but not entirely. Weeks later, it became the biggest fears in my life. My husband worked 3-odd shift, so he is never home at night. Soon, I started to go into sleep paralysis. At first, it was just minor. I could deal with it. Then it became consistent, almost every other night. The nights my husband was home, he would hold me to sleep. Sleeping in his arms did not do much, because I still got sat on. The nights he went to work, I would stay up all night till he comes home in the morning around 7. One night, I felt it again, but this time I couldn't breathe. I thought to myself, if I can't get up, I will die. I still have my kids. I cannot die. In my thoughts, I told the spirit Kuvyog, Ibtug Neeg Nkj NCs. Kuvyog, Ibtug Neeg Nkj NCs. I am a pure person. I am a pure person. And it quickly stopped. I woke up in terror. The next night, it happened again, but this time I was able to open my eyes. As it may have felt like a dream, it did lead me to see a hand reaching over to cover my mouth, and I again couldn't breathe. The nights after, I didn't know what to do. Using my sword and the sword technique was not helping, so I would cover my mouth with my phone. I figured something physical would help since it's blocking access, and it did. Finally, I told my mom, who was also a shaman, and her master was able to fight it off. Turned out, the dragon spirit is not just a small spirit, but a dragon prince of the great lake that we lived nearby, particularly the lake my Sills and I went into at the beginning of the story, and have been waiting for me for years. It had found me when I stepped into the lake. My mom's master was able to put him in his place, and he promised not to bother me again. My mom said it was a tough fight, because since he was a prince, he was very skilled and have hurt my mom's master for a few days as well. Anyways, the original shaman that came in at the beginning was able to cleanse my spirit and did what she could to add more shield. Ever since then, I was able to sleep better. The story doesn't really end here, but I can finally say I am free. And since it's too long, I will just end it here. Happy Halloween. Story 6. The trees see everything. A couple of years ago, my wife and I headed out to Stanislaus National Forest to meet up with some friends for a dispersed camping trip. It was us and 2 other cars, including 2 other couples. It was up to me to find an off-road trail for the group to complete before we found a campsite. After meeting at the waypoint, we navigated our way up the rugged 6-mile trail and enjoyed our lunch with the epic mountain views. After taking many pictures, we made our way down the trail to a lake my friend found that was located in a Bureau of Land Management, BLM area. If you aren't aware, BLM land is public land in America where you are allowed to camp, as long as there are no camping signs posted. We all followed my friend for about an hour, up and down the freeway, trying to find this lake. There was little to no signal along this freeway, so it was best to say we were a bit lost. We eventually drove by a smaller lake with a small souvenir store. We asked the store clerk for directions to the bigger lake my friend wanted to visit, and to our surprise, it was only 2 miles down from where we were. We had missed the turn multiple times because the street sign blended in with the lush greens growing around it. We all made our way to the lake, finally reaching our destination just to find the gate to the lake was closed. It was around 6:30 p.m., and nightfall was just around the corner. We decided to try a different lake the next morning and find a spot to camp before it got dark. My friend led the way and found a wide enough stand-alone campsite that was spacious enough to fit all 3 cars. It was the perfect spot surrounded by tall pine trees and a makeshift fire pit. We proceeded to make our dinner and have a few drinks. I didn't feel like getting buzzed, so I opted for 1 White Claw. It was sunset at this time, and as my friend was setting up his projector screen, a car drove by and honked its horn and just kept driving. We found that to be odd but didn't pay it much attention. Sundown soon came and we all cuddled in our camp chairs in front of the projector to watch a movie for a nightcap. All but myself had a few drinks and some of that good green while enjoying the movie. This is where things started to get interesting. As I sat there, sober, trying to enjoy the movie and laugh along with the occasional jokes amongst ourselves, I kept feeling as if we were being watched. I would look behind me into the woods several times but could not see anything through the thick, dark trees. This uneasy feeling warranted me to grab my gun out of the car to strap to my belt just in case it was a bear or mountain lion. At about 10 p.m., we decided to say goodnight and scattered off to sleep. My wife and I slept in my SUV on our airbed with a hatch tent. One couple also slept in their car, and the other couple stayed in a ground tent, both not too far from us. After about 20 minutes, all the giggles subsided and silence filled the air. I woke up around 12 and hearing people in the distance conversing, but went back to sleep, thinking that maybe my friends were still hanging out. I looked over at my wife, and she was completely knocked out. I started to have that uneasy feeling again, so I moved my gun closer to me. I tried my best to fall back asleep. Finally asleep, in my conscious dream, I started to notice the same voices, but louder and closer. It was the sounds of men and women talking, and then all of a sudden, I heard the wind blow through the trees, and along with a whisper, "The trees see everything." That phrase kept repeating itself until I opened my eyes, and I looked around to see dark figures all around my car looking in. I freaked out and reached for my gun. As I looked at the dark figures, a sense of curiosity came over me, as if the dark figures were trying to let me know they were just curious about us. I looked closer and could tell they were native, indigenous to the area. I slowly put my gun back down. It was then, when my nerves calmed down, that my eyesight suddenly was blinded with visions of the campsite. The visions were like memories fast-forwarded of all those who have visited and camped there before us. There were families and groups of friends, all sorts of ethnicities. I could hear their conversations, their laughter, and the sounds of children playing. Their clothing was dated back to the 60s, through to the 70s, 80s, and so on. All while that same phrase repeated itself in the background. The trees see everything. I could feel the wind rushing around me. It was like I was standing there surrounded by a sphere of memories. Suddenly, the vision stopped and I felt a strong presence shadowing over the window on the side of where my wife slept. I could feel the other dark figures slowly fade away, as if they were bowing their heads to this strong presence. It was that gesture that made me understand that this strong presence could possibly be their leader or chief. My fear grew again since it was hovering near my wife. I remember thinking that we weren't here to harm anyone or the land. We just want to sleep. I again reached for my gun as I didn't want anything to happen to my wife. As I turned to reach for my gun, turned around and it was gone. All the dark figures were gone. That's when I woke up and immediately looked around with my heart pounding through my chest with cold sweat. I looked at the window next to my wife and saw nothing but a shadow of a tall tree. It was silent, and all I could hear was the slight wind blowing against the tree branches. My wife was still silently asleep. The next morning, we packed up to leave for the lake. As we pulled out, my wife asked me, did they stay up late last night? I kept hearing people talking. I looked at her and said, "Shh, I'll tell you about it when we leave." She knew exactly what I meant. When we got home, she said that she also heard voices all through the night as she was in and out of sleep. I told my family member, who is a shaman, about my experience, and she said that I likely had an astral projection experience. She advised me that next time I go camping, do a prayer and offering to the land. Although this wasn't a haunting story, I thought it was such a surreal experience to have seen what they showed me. I have so much respect for the land I camp on, and it is now always in my practice to do a prayer and offering before we bunker down for camp. Story 7. Challenge of the Spirits. It was early June, and my younger brother wanted to go camping. So he called some of his buddies and some of our cousins. There were 6 of us, and we went in 3 cars because we had stuff to bring with us. We left on Friday morning and got to the campsite at 11 a.m. I checked the weather before we came, and it was sunny and clear for the next 6 days. When we got there, everyone unpacked and set up camp while I was getting the campfire started. After I got the fire started and camp was set up, we cooked some brats, ribs, and hamburgers. As the campfire was starting to die down, I told one of our cousins to go cut some dead trees on the ground. The camp manager said whatever logs or trees we find on the ground, it's up for grabs. So we bought a small axe to chop some wood. The cousin found a long piece of log and was chopping it away. He couldn't chop it, so he dragged it to where the fire was. Everyone was like, "Hey, you're not supposed to drag it like that." I already had a bad feeling, and this was just the first day. As it was getting late, out comes the beer. Everyone was popping cans left and right, except me. I'm not a drinker, nor would I drink more than one can. The cousin that dragged the log popped out hard liqueur from the cooler. He made everyone drink it, but me. They were trying to figure out if the lady on the bottle of liqueur was standing or leaning LOL. They were all drunk by now and puking everywhere. The cousin that dragged the log went to puke, and at the exact same place he dragged the log from. And he said, "Nutseg mwaj dab koje nyob kov tog nai taz las mom." You bastard ghost. Where are you at? Come out. I started yelling, "Hey man, you can say that, stop it right now." He was way too drunk, then said that's what I thought with his hands out. By this time, I told everyone to go to sleep. This was around 10:30 p.m. now, and quiet time was at 11 p.m. When everyone was in the tent, I heard noises coming from out the tent. "Can you guys come out here and turn off the campfire?" I was like, "Oh yeah, sure." There was 2 camp rangers, so I quickly poured water over the fire and came back inside the tent. The rangers left, and everyone started to sleep, but still had that drunkest talk. My brother woke up to my other cousin, who was stuck on the outside of the tent, but was also inside the tent. He puked all over everyone's sandals, and my brother was helping him clean part of the tent. All of a sudden, another cousin wakes up and pisses through the front of the tent. Then I woke up and was like, what's going on? After everyone went back to bed, my brother heard strange noises outside the tent. When morning came, I went to the car to get something, when all of a sudden, everywhere around us had greenish moss all over, and on our cars had maggots. Lots and lots of maggots. It didn't cover up the windows, but like you could see the maggots crawling around. I freaked out and said we have to leave and go back home. The cousin who puked all over everyone's sandals said he wasn't feeling good, and he wanted to go home. Some really want to stay, some didn't. So I said, let's just go home, and we started packing up. All of a sudden, there was a wind gust that blew in strange white fog. Some got scared and ran into the car. I shouted for everyone to just come back out and hurry up and pack up things so we can leave. We got done packing and had some bags of garbage to throw away. The dumpster was in the front of the entrance, and everyone grabbed a bag. We all walked to the front to throw away the garbage. As we came back, 2 camp rangers came on a golf cart and informed us that there is a huge storm coming our way. We told them that we are done camping and are going to leave. The camp rangers asked, why so soon? Because we rented the campsite for 3 days. We just said we have change of plans. As we got to our cars, we bolt out of that campground. I thought we would get followed by something, so I told everyone to stop at a gas station before we came back home. As we got to the gas station, I checked all our cars, and there was no more maggots or green moss. This happened just last year, 2014. I still do want to go camping, but not at that campground anymore. My mom was yelling at us and said that if we had stayed another night, we would have seen something worse than maggots. Story 8. The Dark Woman. I began having dreams or visions about a dark woman dressed in black clothes as a kid. My parents say Before all of this, they found me wandering the woods in our backyard, and perhaps an evil spirit latched onto me. They brought me to a shaman, and he did jingle bells, and I didn't see her again for a long time. Then one night when I was 16, I was sleeping with my little sister when I heard the doorknob turning. When I opened my eyes a little, the dark woman was sitting on the bed with us. She just sat there, looking at the wall. I was so scared, I couldn't move or talk. In the morning, my sister said I was pale and sweating with a fever. So my parents called another shaman, and we did the whole thing over again. This time, they told me I had to move far away, so I did. My parents sent me to Cali to live with relatives. I didn't see the dark woman anymore, and my life was going good. I was out of school and working. One night, I had just come back from clubbing with my girlfriends when I noticed a dark shape in my rearview mirror. I thought it was just a coat my friends had left behind, but then two eyes looked directly at me, and I froze with terror. My car nearly swerved out of control as I parked on the roadside. But when I looked in the mirror, it was gone. I have since moved back to MN with my family, and although I haven't seen the dark woman, I keep thinking she'll show up again one day. I hope not, though. Story 9. The Night Visitor, a haunting at the crossroads of love and loss. This story had happened many years ago when my husband and I were going through a rough patch. At that time, my husband worked graveyard shift, so he was hardly around. Because of our constant arguing and bickering, our home soon felt dark and lonely. During that time, our daughter was only 4 years old. This one particular night that my husband was off, we argued again. I packed my belongings, took our daughter, and headed to my parents' house. They lived at least 20 minutes away. After hours of getting lectured, my parents made me go back home. They had told me they didn't want a divorced daughter and would not take me back if I divorced my husband. So I had no choice but to head back home. At this time, it was already around 9 p.m. I cried along the way as I was driving. I didn't want to go back into that broken home yet, so I kept driving and driving. We made a spot to a nearby park. I parked there and just cried. I told my daughter nothing was wrong when she asked me why I keep crying. Suddenly my daughter goes, "Mommy, there's a grandma outside the door. I think she wants to come in." I immediately stopped crying and looked around. My heart dropped. There was no one. I felt the hairs on my body stood up and raced back home. I called my husband and asked him to wait by the door for me. He asked me, "What's going on?" I told him to just wait, and I'll tell him later. Once we got home, I grabbed my daughter and ran back inside the house as my husband was waiting by the door. I didn't tell him anything till the next day. I explained to him what happened, and he yelled at me to do something so stupid. He also told me that when he looked out the window and saw my car pulling up, he thought I had brought my mom over to talk to us. When he opened the door and waited, no one was there, so he thought he saw wrong. We moved out months after that and did a ritual. Story 10. The Cabin Haunting, a terrifying weekend in the woods. Today and yesterday was not only the scariest thing my girlfriend and I witnessed, but the worst. We decided to go out on a vacation in the woods, where we will be renting a cabin for the weekend. Several friends came along to make things more amusing. Just after arriving to our cabin, I had a strange, eerie feeling that we weren't the only ones. Could I possibly be over-exaggerating, but something tells me otherwise. It was a long trip, and we were exhausted. Finished unpacking and decided to settle down and cook. After dinner, we had thought that it's time for bed. That's when it came to me. We wasn't alone. At approximately 2:47 am, I woke up to a strange sound. A child crying downstairs. Terrified, I ran into the room, woke up the friends closest to the restroom to ask if they can hear what just happened. To no concern of them, they fell back asleep. Having the courage to go into my room, I heard multiple footsteps from all over the cabin. Quickly woke up the GF to stay up and ask if she can hear what was going on. Waking her up had quieted down on what was happening to me. Staying up, we decided to turn on the TV and watch a few shows until sunrise. Sun came up. I waited until I hear doors open from the others before I can open mine. We all head downstairs for breakfast. Having the incident happen to me, I explain what had happened. They all laugh and thought I was joking. Jokingly laughing with them, I thought it'll be nice to go out sledding. When coming back, I had the same feeling happening, as if I don't want to be here. So soon after entering the cabin, I felt my hair rising up. The minute I knew, I jokingly asked if they wanted to leave. Of course, they wanted to stay. It was a vacation. Lunch came into dinner, and nightfall came. Again, I had the same incident happen, but with the GF staying up with me, we both heard it. A cry, footsteps coming from downstairs, then footsteps upstairs where our room is located. Seconds became minutes when soon enough the doorknob decided to turn. To my knowledge, it looks like it wanted to come in. Quickly running to lock the door quietly opened. Slamming the door, locking it, I look under to see a pale face looking right back. Frightened, I turn back to my GF to realize she's under the blanket, scared to death. Cried for help, but no one can hear. We got under the blanket, and it seems something was in the room with us. Bed pushed down from our feet. We kicked, nothing. Blanket starts to get lifted from our feet. Eye opening, it was a figurine of a pale woman. We jumped out of bed and ran into our friend's room and woke up our friends to explain. But my GF started sobbing, going into a seizure attack. Not normal, because it was her first time. Called 911 and ended up at the hospital and out of the cabin. At the hospital, morning came. We thought it was time to go get the luggage and come back to the hospital. Nothing happened when we entered the cabin, but of course, I had the same feeling still. Heading back to the hospital, entering the room, my GF was acting strange. She laughed at the incident that had happened to us. Later that day, she was released and prescribed with some medication. Decided to head home. I explained what had happened to my friends. Taken from their view, they apologized for mistakenly thinking I was lying. Home we were. The Jeev and I decided to head to bed. Me staying awake while watching the GF sleep. A few minutes pass and I hear mumble from her. She wakes up to look at me, telling me she's seeing what had happened to us in her dream. She even said that she feel the thing grabbed her, pull her away from me while her eyes were opened. She told me she couldn't talk nor move while I was there. Yet I couldn't even notice that. Was it sleep paralysis? Did it take her spiritually? Still scared should I talk to my parents about it. Could it be that when the door opened, it was already inside? Story 11. The Cry of the Lost Infant. A haunting echo on the village trail. My uncle had told me this story a few years ago during the pandemic. It takes place in most likely the late 60s, early 70s in Luang Prabang. So back in the day, my Niamte's grandma and everybody lived in the village. Obviously, everybody knew each other. One day, my grandma took my uncle, who was around 4 years old, at the time, along with her cousins, etc., to go farming for the day. Back in the day, there were no cars, so my grandma my uncle, and my other great-aunts/relatives had to travel by walking. At the end of the day, they had to walk back, but they had to walk a long trail. But a week prior, a fellow relative's baby had died, and coincidentally on the same trail that my grandma and them had to travel through. That was where the BABYWASBURIED. But since the sun was going down, Grandma and Uncle and all the other grandmas had no choice but to go that way home. Back then, there was no plastic water bottles, so obviously they only had one water canteen for everybody. But because it was so hot, everybody drank most of the water. My uncle was only 4 at the time, so he was crying about being hungry and thirsty. My grandma started to yell at him and lecture him to not whine. Ironically, when they were walking, it was near where the relative's baby was buried. While my grandma yelled at my uncle, all of a sudden a random baby's cry was heard on the other side of the land. Story 12. The Final Heart Song. My spiritual awakening through grandmother's last wishes. It was the last days of being with my grandmother, as she had had a stroke, and there was nothing we could do for her in her late age and health. That morning, I was with my cousin taking care of her and cleaning her up so that she could get comfortable whilst listening to my aunt's gossip about drama that occurred the night before. My grandma was no longer verbal from the stroke, but would squeeze your hand in understanding. And as I sat there, I remember thinking in my head, there was no way I was going to let anyone harm her or disrespect her in her present state. I remember saying in my heart to her that I would promise to hear her words to me and fulfill my promise to her to love all of her kids for her when she left. And just as I said this in my heart, she looked my way and squeezed my hand. It had only been months prior to this moment when she had revealed to me my journey ahead. You see, she was a powerful Niamnib, a shaman of the highest form. She told me then, she knew when I was very young that I also had the gift, and that one day I would follow in her path. This occurred in an almost trance-like state between us. Like everything around us went blank, and it was just the two of us in this loud room full of people in our own little bubble where our souls connected. She revealed to me that my instincts about my last few months of incredible spiritual download was correct, that I had the gift. And when I asked her why she had not told me of this years ago, when she figured it out, all she said to me was, "I had to wait till you were ready to hear and to believe in your power." It had taken me months since then to come to realize this journey ahead of me becoming a shaman in my own right was going to happen one way or another. You see, some shamans goes and seek their calling. Others, like myself and my grandma, were chosen by their spirit guides and have journeys ahead of us that have already been paved for us. Having finally confirmed my fears, she told me I was going to go on this journey. But for me to wait until I was ready and had my teacher and partner to hold me to this realm. Back to my grandma on her last hours with us. There came a time in my instinct knowing she was getting ready to go. And this moment came just like when she had revealed to me my calling. There we were again, just the two of our souls in this big house full of people, and everything got quiet. We were in our own little bubble again. Now, I have never been in a trance-like state before these times, but I knew then, as I know now, they are absolutely real moments. Moments where your souls connect, and you hear what I call a heart song. There had been hours of time that went down that day that the shaman who'd come to interpret Grandma's spirit guides and another shaman family member's supposed spirit guides basically had a spiritual battle. And then there was me, a new awakened person with the gift I had only just discovered. All of a sudden, I'm speaking in the most clear hum I have ever spoken in my life. If y'all knew me, you'd know I grew up with white people, so my hum was childlike in vocabulary. I've never been able to speak such clear and well-spoken Hmong before in my life. But here I was, in the quiet which I've come to call it, where our spirits connect, and I was able to interpret for my grandma. All of a sudden, I'm telling my elders, my family members, my siblings, my parents, this is what she's telling us she needs so that she can leave us and go in peace. I went through every wish she had. For her children to hold her one last time, for her grandchildren to say goodbye one last time, for her family to wash her one last time to get all her good luck and well wishes, for her daughters to dress her in her old clothes to prepare her for her next life. All these wishes she had for all of us. Never in my life had I ever been so spiritually connected to another person as I had my grandmother. Our Texoje Kebonib that bonded us in this special place, only we knew. I have learned now that this is what unconditional love entails. That as the old chapter of one lifetime ends, another begins. She was such a great teacher to me, in the so very short months we had in this connection. She was a mother to me, my safe place, my greatest support. This isn't a scary ghost story, but I hope for anyone who is going through something as powerful as this moment I had, that they aren't alone. Also, that each and every one of you take every moment you have with your loved one to your advantage. This life is so short, and at the end of it, all that matters is the unconditional love you put out there. Story 13. The night Grandma became a monster, a terrifying summer of secrets and shadows. Before the story starts, let me explain my family and home. There is a total, us 4 kids, and my parents. My siblings at that time were about 8 years old. I was the oldest of my sisters. Our house had only 3 rooms. My sisters and I shared a room. Names will be changed. A is me, B is the second sister, C is the third sister, and D is for the sister. Back in June 1998, my family and I welcomed my grandma to our home. She was living with my dad's older brother. Since they were moving to Wisconsin, my grandma wanted to come live with us. We were so happy to have her come live with us. Luckily, we got to spend time with her since we were off for summer break. As the days went by, we started to notice that Grandma was different. She wasn't the happy, smiling person she once was. During the day, she was always sleeping in her room. But when night came, she was a completely different person. At first, we kids didn't think much of it until one night my parents left for Zoua SMO. Someone died, and they left to go stay with the family. B and D were in the living room watching TV, while C was taking a shower. All our rooms, including the bathroom, were in one hallway. As we were watching TV, we heard C hysterically scream out of the bathroom. She jumped on me, which caused both B and D to jump over to us as well. She kept crying and pointing to the hallway, saying, "Pojeua dab. Pojeua dab. Grandma. Grandma is a monster." I told her it was nonsense and not to speak ill of Grandma. As I was trying to calm all of them, I saw Grandma poking her head out and giggling like a little kid. Grandma slowly walked out of the hallway, still giggling. She slowly walked to the kitchen. My siblings and I slowly got up to see what she was doing. She was dancing with her back towards us. I called out to her, "Pog Pog, Koja's dab Tios." Grandma, what are you doing?" She slightly turned her head toward us with a sinister grin and said in the most chilling voice Kiev, "Run." We all ran. I was the last one to get in the room. I turned to see Grandma was on all fours running towards us. I slammed the door shut. What sucks even more was that our rooms don't have locks. We all used as much strength as we had to block the door. Grandma kept banging the door for us to open for her. Each time she tried to push her way in, we pushed back even more. For some reason, she was so strong. She was able to get one arm inside and grabbed hold of my sister C's shirt. We all screamed for our grandma to stop. She was scaring us. As we were screaming, we all heard my dad scream an IAM. "KOJ, UADIABTCLIKORA, UKOJCOJXEEBNTXWV, MOMWYAREYOUDOINGTHISTO, YOURGRAENDTDUISID. Grandma stopped what she was doing and laughed that she was just playing with us since it had been so long since she last played with us. As our parents came in, we all cried to them that Grandma was very scary. That night, we all slept in my parents' room. As morning came, Grandma was sleeping in her room. My and sisters, I were outside playing. I went inside to get water when I overheard my parents on the phone with my uncle, my dad's older brother. My parents found out that Grandma had been doing the same thing to my uncle's family. The only difference was that while Grandma was still living with them, she would only walk around the house crying like a cat. That very same day, my dad went out to get doorknobs with locks for our room and their room. As night approached, my parents were leaving again for Zoua. I begged for one of them to at least stay with us. My dad went and grabbed the phone from the living for me to hold on to it, just in case anything happened. Before we went to bed, my dad told me no matter what we heard that night, don't open the door. They promised they'd be back soon. Me and my sisters, we pushed our 2 twin beds together. Scared, I couldn't sleep, so I decided to stay up to keep watch. Just as I was dozing off, I heard my grandma calling out to me, "Me naib abos, me naib kibkov rujos." "Sweetie, sweetie, open the door." I sat right up and listened carefully. I can hear humming from behind the door. It was Grandma humming. It was the humming she used to hum to make us sleep. The humming soon stopped with sniffles. Grandma was now crying. It pained my heart to hear her cry. As I slowly walked up to the door, I silently cried. Apart from me, I was scared and sad that I didn't know whether to open or not. As I was questioning myself, Grandma on the other side of the door said me naib yogpog. Kavdas me naib koje, sis hlub poglos. Pog. Shaib chaib plabos. Taxab anshayos. Pog tisasoratos. Nshayos. Sweetie, it's me, Grandma. My sweetie, you don't love Grandma. Grandma is hungry. Don't be scared. Grandma won't be scary. I was going to open the door, but I remember that Dad said never to open the door, no matter what. I slowly backed away from the door. She started banging on the door and twisting the doorknob. My other 3 sisters jolted out of our bed. I jumped on the bed looking for the phone. I dialed my dad's number. He wasn't answering his phone. Panicked, my sisters, and I quickly grabbed whatever we had to protect ourselves. We sat on the bed watching her constantly banging on the other side of the door. That's when the phone rang. I quickly answered, and it was my dad. I cried, telling him to come up home now that Grandma is crazy again. He told me to take my siblings and me to hide while he and Mom drove back home. I did as he said, and we went to go hide in the closet. As we went into hiding, Grandma stopped banging the door. She started crying, asking for one of us to open for her. She misses us and just wants to cuddle. After a while, I heard a few voices yelling out to Grandma. Those voices were my dad's and a few older men. I heard the door unlocked and my dad telling us girls to come out. We all ran out to my dad, crying hysterically. That night, my mom took us to sleep at an auntie's house, while Dad and the other men stayed behind along with a shaman. The following morning, Mom took us back home. Everything seems to have been back to normal. Grandma wasn't scary anymore, though after a week later, she passed. I never knew what happened after we left for my aunt's house. It wasn't until I got older and married that I asked my mom what truly happened. She told me Grandma was from a family that turns into tigers. During her time with us, she was slowly becoming a tiger, due to our uncle not doing anything while she was with them and not telling us we weren't able to save her. Mom also said Grandma was already growing a tail that was about 3 inches. I was in disbelief that something like that could still happen. Story 14. The voices outside my window, a chilling 4 a.m. Mystery. Last year, around this time, I always had my alarm set to 4 a.m. so that I could be ready and go pick up my sister Kalina to go to work. We both work at the same place, which was about 45 minutes away. One day before my alarm went off, I woke up to hear talking coming from outside by window. I clearly heard them say, "It is time for her to wake up." I was like, wait, what time is it? Why is there talking outside? As I tried to listen to the talking, I couldn't make out what it was saying anymore. It started to sound like gibberish. I grabbed my phone to look at the time, and it was 3:55 a.m. Then I started to hear just 2 cats meow back and forth. I am still confused to this day because of what I heard. Thank you for always supporting the channel and welcoming its videos. Wishing you good health, and remember to subscribe to the channel to achieve 1,000 subscriptions.